You're listening to the number one podcast for nonprofit leaders, getting your nonprofit fully funded. This is the Fundraising Masterminds Podcast. You know, in the movie Star Wars, Luke is kind of like the hero, and I feel like you're kind of like Luke Skywalker in terms of like development. But you know, every Luke Skywalker has a Master Yoda.
Has a Yoda, yeah.
And today we're going to meet your Master Yodas.
Yeah.
Welcome back to another episode of the Fundraising Masterminds Podcast. We are super excited to have you join us today. And today's a special episode because we've got a special guest, Larry Onan. Welcome to the show, Larry.
Thank you very much. Hi there, guys. Glad to join you today.
Well, Larry Onan, I'm really excited about, you know, in the movie Star Wars, Luke is kind of like the hero, and I feel like you're kind of like Luke Skywalker in terms of like development, but you know, every Luke Skywalker has a Master Yoda.
Has a Yoda, yeah.
And today we're going to meet your Master Yoda. So
yeah.
Would you mind introducing us to him and tell us a little bit of background behind how you met him?
Well, Larry's going to share a little bit about an exceptional book that he has just written, but I have a special privilege of going all the way back to the mid to early 1980s. Dinosaurs roamed the earth in those days. I was just transferred into the Office of Development in San Bernardino, California. I arrived a neophyte in development, had absolutely no idea what development was. 125 people waking up every morning, hearing about development and doing development, meeting with major donors, and leading that effort at that time was a gentleman who I had not known at the time by the name of Larry Onan.
Wow.
And Larry led an amazing effort. I was privileged to get to know Larry, and Larry for the last 40 years has been a mentor to me, a resource, someone that in tough times I could contact, bounce ideas off of, celebrated with me in good times, and Larry had an amazing impact on my life. So as I look back now and I have the opportunity to make an impact on so many people's lives because of the 40 years, Larry had another 20 plus years on me even in
Wow.
that. And so his experience, the number of organizations he's been able to help over the years is vast, and I think you're going to be blessed by this interview and by the book.
Wow. So we've really got the Master Yoda of, I thought you were the Master Yoda, but every Yoda has a Master Yoda, right?
Yes, absolutely. So he is, Larry has forgotten more about development than I'll ever know. So he's an amazing man.
Larry, it's great to meet you. And if you wouldn't mind, I would love to know how you got into development. We've heard the stories of how Jim got into development many times and how he was shaking in his boots. But I would love to hear from you. And personally, actually, I would love to hear your impression of Jim Dempsey when he first got into development. But I would love to hear from you just how you got involved in development and just what you thought when you first met Jim. That would be really cool to hear.
Let me go back 20 more years before I ever met Jim. I had 5 or 6 years working in the music world with the ministry I was with. I had no clue I would ever end up in fund development of any kind. That was not my goal and objective. I was putting groups out. I had groups in Europe and Asia and across the United States. And I thoroughly loved the whole idea of taking something from nothing and creating these performing evangelistic style groups that were traveling across the country and around the world. It was in the fall of 1972 that I was asked to come to the vice president's office because he had a problem. I had no clue what I was going to do the next day. I just took the opportunity and I said, let's go. And then the guy told me I was going to have the appointment, said, and you're going to meet somebody in the hotel where the offices were. And you two are going to go together. He just arrived. He just raised his personal support to be in the ministry. And we don't know what to do with him. So take him with you. And I literally walked into an office and said, what do you want us to do? And the vice president at the time said, well, there was a pledge made about 90 days ago. It totals around $2 million. And all the pledge cards are still in my bathtub. And his office was a hotel room. And he said, come with me in my bathroom. So this is the beginnings of my development experience. I literally walked into a bathroom. He pulled the shower curtain back and 28 boxes of pledge cards were sitting there that had not been opened in 90 days. And his request was, could you guys take these and see if there's any value in this pledge? It's really old and the boxes have never been cut open. But if you can turn this into anything, I would really appreciate it. And that day we talked a little bit more. I took those 28 boxes with my new friend of 15 minutes, and we began to decide what in the world did we got ourselves into? What do we do next? So for anybody that's never started in development, there's hope, because you can start with nothing and you can actually create something. We were doing it with a wing and a prayer, because there was no concept, any idea of training of any kind. There was nobody to tell us if we were doing it right or if we were doing it wrong. We just began with nothing and started figuring out what are we supposed to do with what we've got. And that ended up being, as Jim said, when he came into the mix, 20 years later, almost 20 years later, or way down the pike at least, I can back to those days, we had 7 departments and 125 people working in various factions of development. So I started off with virtually no knowledge, but I decided a long time ago, somebody told me with a concept that really has stuck with me. Larry, you always got the freedom to fail. Don't be afraid to try something. Mm-hmm. I think so many times people are stuck because they're afraid of the consequences. And my advice and my mentors kept saying, you've got the freedom to fail. If it doesn't work once, you can go back and try again. And all you're doing is trying to find a way to break through. And so that really became a time of huge change. My friend and I found about a conference of about 50, 60 people meeting in Tulsa, Oklahoma. We decided that we wanted to go. The ministry that I was with would not pay our way and told us if they wanted to, we could take money from our personal support raising and go, but they didn't see the value. We went, and that was the beginning of networking with other like-minded believers, figuring out something that no one had ever figured out before. And that was in the early spring of 1973, I believe, when I first went to that conference. But that put me on a track of saying, we'll figure this out. We can fail. We can go for it. That had nothing to do, Jim, with the book at this time. I was doing very classical exchange fundraising. We were being successful over the next 5 years. There's nothing sinful about tactics at all, but the tactics we were using were pretty much exchanges and just trying our best to see if we could get people to respond to us. It was mostly by mail at that time. We eventually realized that the larger people needed more touch, so we started relational fund development. But I had no clue what I was doing except a wing and a prayer and a group of people that came alongside believing that God may want us to do something unique and unusual. So that's the beginnings of how I got into this crazy subject of fund development. And you notice that I use the word fund development very intentional here. The first 5 or 6 years I was doing fundraising. That's pretty much at the bottom line of fundraising is exchange. You do something for me, I do something for you. We're both happy about the outcomes. Sometimes they use intimidation. This morning I got a direct mail or I guess it was an email with intimidation as the motivation for me to give. Larry, we sent you 7 emails and you've not responded. Where are you at? Are you going to help me this time? I mean, it was almost intimidating to a point that I didn't want to receive any more mail. Wow. Because they were belittling me for not doing something that they wanted me to do. That's extreme. But sometimes there's tactics that are used out there that are really kind of ungodly to get us to emotionally trigger our response.
Oh, wow. Larry, how much has changed? Even in the 1980s when I arrived, clearly I was standing on your shoulders, and I came into an experience where we had a whole training curriculum. They wouldn't allow me for the first 3 months to really delve into development until I understood the concept, went through tapes and training materials to get me to really understand. That conference in Tulsa, that particular conference was in Dallas my first year. And, the training that I got of that was just invaluable. And of course, by that time later, our organization was covering the entire cost of that. So what a big difference, a stark contrast from when you came into development to when I came in. And like I said, a lot of that is...
There's an element here. I think that we sometimes forget that we came out of World War II. Everything was God focused. Everything was a handshake and a trust factor.
Yeah.
So our founder and president of the organization that I was with had relationships that were very impressive, but it was a handshake. There was no paper. He would just have a handshake, have a meeting, drink coffee or whatever you did, make a decision, and people trusted him. So in that context, we had a culture that was highly trustworthy. When I was in college, we had a major thing happen. We had a president assassinated. And I think the whole culture became very leery of handshakes. So no longer could you just have a friend and give you money. You had to do some work to get it. You had to prove where you were going to go with it. And I think the culture was shifting. At the time I started, there was no handbooks. There was no training. There was nothing. I mean, it was literally sitting at big tables trying to figure out what do we do with this and can we read the writing on the card right. It was chaotic in some respects, a lot of fun because nobody knew what we were doing down that room. So in some ways we got away with a lot more because we just were trying to figure it out. But I think the culture shifted. And when the culture shifted, people want to know more about what they're engaged with. They want to know a little bit more about what you're really doing. And in this day and age, it's even more important than ever that you really outline your program. You've got to outline where you're going. You've got to give them real expectations. You've got to follow up. You've got to see commitments as a pledge in a faith sense, and then follow it up because pledges are not going to come in automatically. People will not respond just because you ask them to. You've got to relate to them and stay with them to build rapport and build relationship of some type. So the culture shifted. Now, what we did back when you came into it, by that time, there was 12 years at least of doing it. And we were saying, we want everybody that comes into our leadership team to have an orientation. And so we created ourselves tapes and study guides and helps because we wanted you, Jim, to come into the culture ready to work, not just winging it and praying anymore.
Right.
We wanted you to implement against core principles that we were already believing in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the core principles are actually foundational to this. The organizations and the guys that I see out there floundering have absolutely no clue what they're doing, and they're still floundering. I was with a group a few weeks ago, and they may be geniuses in their field of expertise, but it's a wing and a prayer when it comes to their fund development strategy. And they've been in ministry for 35 years.
Sure.
And they're relying on me saying, well, you're the one that knows what to do, so tell us what to do. I'll listen to you and you tell me. Well, I'm thinking, I thought I was retired, and here I'm still going through the same process.
Yeah.
So I think that there's a foundation behind all of this that said there's going to be intentionality every step we take through our life, and intentionality in doing our job in terms of fundraising.
Well, absolutely. Well, Larry, at that time, there was a book that was a real primer for me, which was Giving Yourself Away, written by Larry Onan. And that was an amazing book that, in my mind became a bestseller. And it was multiple printings. And I just passed it on to everybody that I knew. But now we've got a new book out right now, which is Intentional Living and Giving. And I'd love to have you talk about this book right now. First of all, Larry, what prompted you in the latter years of your life to decide you're going to write a book after an amazing career as in ministry, in consulting? What prompted you to decide another book on giving needs to come out?
Well, Jim, in the mid to early 80s is when I created the concepts and the material, the principles behind that book. And I was assigned the job, and nobody knew they were assigning me to do anything. I was in a meeting because there had been a success track record of raising funding. I was invited to a meeting that I had no business being into. It was a funding program to raise $1 billion. We had the ministry had found a consulting group that felt like that they could help us get there. They'd done a considerable feasibility study and a lot of analysis. And this was the meeting where they were coming in to share with the ministry leadership their conclusions and what to do next. And I was invited to this meeting. I was the low guy on the totem pole. I had nothing to say in the meeting other than there and sit and take notes. And I was acknowledged because I was just a part of the team, but it was really not a decision-making process. one of the consultants was very firm, and with the ministry leaders, that if you don't teach biblical stewardship as a lifestyle, you're going to create animosity and competition across the Christian market. If you teach lifestyle, you're going to open up acres and acres and acres of additional giving, and everybody's going to be blessed because of it. But you've got to get to the mindset that you've got to teach lifestyle stewardship. Now, he did not tell us what lifestyle stewardship was. Nobody in the room knew what lifestyle stewardship was. That was a term he had used. And there was quite a debate going on about, well, we don't want to start another ministry to do something else. And so somebody in the room after 15 or 20 minutes said, we really can't do this, and this is the pros and the cons. I don't even know who said it in the room. They said, let's assign that job off to Larry, because he's been doing this for a few years, and maybe he can figure out what lifestyle stewardship would be. And what it did is it closed down the discussion and let them move to other topics. And I wrote down, figure out what lifestyle stewardship is. And at the bottom of the page, I wrote down, and you've got the freedom to fail. Now, nobody ever saw my little footnote, but I felt like I was starting with 28 boxes of pledge cards. I had no clue what this meant to us. To me, stewardship was Stewardship Sunday, where you pitch people for money, make them feel guilty, and collect the pledge for a church. That was pretty much what stewardship was. The ministry that I was a part of had a booklet called Stewardship, and it was all about the tithe and your responsibility to give to the local church. The whole message was money, 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 money. Get it, collect it, you're obligated to it. The Old Testament tells you to do it. So the old frame of stewardship that many people think of today is stewardship equals money. That is not true. Now, I didn't know that, but I have a high responsibility factor in my life. And so about 3 weeks after that meeting, I said, I better start figuring this out. And I pulled 5 or 6 guys, the leadership of my ministry team. And I said, let's figure this out together and let's own it together. And so we started looking at the scripture. We started looking at a number of other elements. We realized that we were doing transactional activity to raise money. And we said, we don't want to be there. We want to be what God wanted to be, and that he wants us to do what he signed us to do. The book is based on the principle that God gave you a job description when he created you. And you come into the world with a job description. You have nothing when you come in, and you don't gain anything while you're here. God owns it all. It's the principle of Chronicles and David's prayer on the dedication of the money that he had raised for the temple. Recognizing God's sovereignty owns everything. But in many cases, these are isolated concepts. So you get the idea of God's ownership. Then you later see in other places that God loves, in Corinthians, Paul talks about God loves a cheerful giver. Yeah. Well, the word cheerful is not ha, 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 ha. It's the word hilaros in Greek. It means to cause to shine like the sun. Now, how in the world does cheerful giving have anything to do with the sun? Well, the sun's a ball of fire. It's designed for one purpose: give off heat and give off life and give balance to the universe. So God said, I'm owning it all, and I am a generous, cheerful giver. I've got to give by my very nature. I'm giving life to you. I'm giving you a job description, which is basically take care of my stuff. That's what he told Adam so much. And then he would walk in the Garden of Eden in the evenings with Adam to see how he was doing with his stuff. So from day one, God intended for us to be taking care of his stuff. Stewardship is a biblical thing, but it's not a money thing. There was no money to exchange. It just take care of my stuff. Yeah. Now I want you to give. I'm a giver. I want to teach you how to give. That's another principle of that. I want you to learn how to ask. Now in the fund development world, we think that's the appeal, get the appeal out there. Asking is people to people and God to people and prayer and all kinds of things. I want people to ask. I was at a conference in Spain a few months ago, and I told people I'd be glad to give them a copy of my book, but in order to get a copy, a digital copy, I wanted everybody to ask me for a copy. I wasn't sending it out to everybody on the list. So during the course of that week, they had to come up and ask me, and then I made an exchange. I said, you give me your information, write me at this email address, and I'll send you a digital copy. Nice. But I didn't send it to everybody at the conference. They had to come up and engage with me and ask me. And I said, I'm asking you to ask because that's a part of what you've got to be doing, is learning how to take the initiative to ask.
Right.
Now, there is the principle of the farmer. This in the farmer's area, what I learned there is this is where manipulation moved in big time. The deception in the marketplace is usually around misunderstanding the principles of the farmer managing his garden and his field. So you have got people out there today that says, if you give to me, God's going to bless you in this way. They put, exchanges in mind to it. It's all about living here, not living to the future. But you need to understand the principles of the farmer. 2 Corinthians 8:9 is all about farming. And you see very clearly what Paul was doing to the culture that understood farming, and the farmer's responsibility to take care of the crops that he puts in the ground and the expectation of the harvest. And then, of course, I think the most exciting part is that once you begin to live this way, you can give out of God's abundant supply, not just out of what your perceived supply is. So really, there's 5 principles that I just kind of laid out there very quickly. And that is the essence of what the book is all about. The book is really in 2 sections. First section is, let's look at the principles and understand how to become what I've coined to be the authorized wealth distributor. You are authorized to give away God's wealth and resources to meet the needs of people around you. God's giving you, and he expects you to give to others. And as you give to others, God has got more available for you, but he wants to see you be a good steward before he's going to waste his stewardship on you. So the whole thing is around just being a person that is taking care of God's stuff. The latter half of the book, chapters 10 through 17, is how do you practically live those principles out in your life. So we get into a chapter on money because everybody expects a chapter on money in a money book about lifestyle stewardship. We get in on principles of how to even make wise decisions on money. We look into deception and how that is a major problem. It was a major problem in Genesis 3, and it's not changed. When Satan moved in on Eve and Adam back in the garden, he was appealing to them to get their attention for the here and now. And he used their senses. And he just appealed to them, and he got them off track and started thinking about themselves by their sight, their smell, their feel, their taste, and all those things. The game plan has not changed since Genesis 3. It's just adapted to the cultures. And so I really want people to be able to identify themselves how they're being deceived. And there is deception all around the world, different, and they are professional deceivers that are making lots of money on a people that think that they want to have a better life right today. I believe God wants you to have a good life today, but that is not what it's all about. It's about being stewards of God's stuff. So, the book, I came back out with it, Jim. Basically, I said, I'm going to retool what I did in the 80s and create it for the millennials and the Gs and the As or the Zs or whatever we call these next groups, because there's a real gap in information, biblical information that lets people work off of principles. And I'm a principle-minded person because principles will carry you regardless of the culture. I've taught this content for 40, 50 years in 35, 40 countries. And culturally, you apply it differently by the tactics that's used, but the principles are universal. So once we get the universals down, anybody, any place, any time can start to implement against those particular principles. And that's what the book is about. It's to help individuals that are listening. It's to help the partners that have a ministry understand who they are, because it is designed to help the receiver, the one that's giving, understand the value of his gift. It's a value to anybody on a staff of a ministry, because it helps that person not get away from the transactional to the biblical understanding of how we are wired. It radically changed what we did in the ministry that you joined, Jim, because we were just doing transactional stuff, and now we said we will no longer be working with donors. We're going to be working with partners. Partners are ones who join hands and work together with us. And the partner is as equally valuable to the ministry as the person that's the missionary. There's no, I'm higher and you're level and I need money and you can give it. Well, there is a principle where money comes from, yes. But at the very core of it is we are doing this together. And if we get people to join us as a partner in ministry with their resources, their prayer, their involvement, it's going to make a lifestyle of change. You're no longer begging for money. That was a term I'd heard many times. Now we are just helping people with God's blessing of stewardship to extend their stewardship to the lives of other people. whether it's humanitarian or it's evangelism or it's training or education. The mission is really immaterial to the outcome. What we're after is just to help people become free. And I want people to thrive in giving. I don't want people to be confused and in fear and think that God can't use them and wonder what their role here in life really is.
Wow. That's great, Larry. I appreciate that so much. It seems to me, Larry, that this would be a valuable book for people in development at all stages, but could also be a very valuable book as a gift to major donors. Would you agree? And what are ways that development leaders could utilize this book, and in what ways?
Well, yes, Jim. The first one is anybody in fund development, whether it's a soup kitchen or an organization with global impact. Do the staff of your team that are working on funding understand the principles behind this book? Are they manipulating people, or are they encouraging partners to be involved in their ministry? So at one level, everybody in a Christian organization should, the president, the board, the staff of development, anybody that deals with the subject, even those who maybe are processing money, need to know what they're processing. They're processing God's resources to help extend the ministry of that particular mission. So there is a broad usage right within the family. The second, but probably the greater impact, is the fund development people giving this generously to other people. I mean, I can make arrangements for you to get the books pretty cheap and just give them away. And I'd be glad to help get that process going. You'd have to buy bulk to do that, but I would be glad to work with any organization out there if they want to get copies of it, and just be generous and just give it to key people. Give it to your board, give it to your president. A few weeks ago, I was with one group and I gave it to the chief development officer and to the president. And I said, I want you to know where I'm coming from on my philosophy and my mission of why I'm even here today. So I gave them a free copy. Now, that's going to take a while because you got to read it and you process it, and it's steps and stages and growth to get there. It's not because I want them to go buy a bulk order, although I hope that that's what they will do, because the people that contribute to that fine ministry, many of them do not know that they are really stewards in partnership with them. They are sometimes reluctantly giving their money, and I want them to be joyful and hilarious in giving their money. So yes, it can be a great gift to say, we want to give you this as a gift to encourage your heart and help you understand God's plan for you in his area of lifestyle stewardship. So yes, bulk, giving it away, getting it to people's hands. People can get it digitally, they can get it in print, they can get it any place in the world where you can find a Barnes & Noble or a Amazon or a Million Books. It's available through all the sources. If they're wanting to get bulk items, they would need to probably contact me, and I would arrange with the publisher for them to do that, and I can outline some pricing. But that is just really to help them jumpstart and help other people think right.
Yep.
But Jim, they need to think right themselves. I have found that the vast majority of people have no clue what that book really says. And all I'm doing is trying to give them principles of Scripture and link them together to where they say, I got it.
Right.
And if you get it, you'll be changed forever.
Boy, that's great. Well, Larry, we'll make sure that we put some links to that, how to get some of your materials.
As Larry was talking, I was just thinking about how much of biblical development is a mindset. So often when we talk to people on the phone, or, when people come to us and ask us to help them, they're coming at it with, as you would say, stinking thinking. Right. And the stinking thinking is a lot of scarcity mindset, I've been hired to get the budget paid, and they're scared, they're afraid of even something simple like, doing a vision dinner. They're afraid. They're like, well, that's going to cost $5,000 or $10,000. We can't do that, And it's like they're not coming at it with the right attitude, with the right mindset. And I love how Larry was just talking about that. Larry has a chapter in here, chapter, I believe is 13, where he talks about living life abundantly. And I just wanted to read some of these major points from here. We have 4 responsibilities for living life abundantly. Responsibility number 1, to reflect God's character, love, and purpose to those you meet as an ambassador of his kingdom. You know, like that's a totally different mindset than kind of the stinking thinking that we come along with, right? Responsibility number 2, to reproduce God's love and power by multiplying his work in your life through the lives of others. You know what I mean? This is some deep stuff. Yeah. Responsibility number 3, to reign on God's behalf as he would reign, using authority to advance his plans on the earth. And responsibility number 4, our responsibility is to manage the time, talent, and treasure he entrusts to you each day as you maximize his influence in the world. So this is a totally different mindset when it comes to, biblical development. We're coming in with the mindset of we are stewarding God's resources, and we are here for a purpose to spread his kingdom, to build his kingdom.
Yeah, that chapter is introducing your job description.
Yeah.
And that chapter is saying, basically, you were signed here on earth to do one thing. Yeah. Take care of my stuff. Here's how you go about doing it. Yeah. And then I give you actually a printable job description. I had a 65-year-old pastor's wife in tears many years ago said, Larry, I have no idea why God placed me here other than to just help my husband.
Yeah.
I mean, she was kind of miserable in that she'd lived 65 years and did not know God's plan for her life. And those are the responsibilities that God assigns to every one of us. Yeah. So what you're talking about is realizing in even fund development, I have a responsibility to act this way. Can I help the president of my organization? Can I help the board? Can I have the authority that reports to me, that I report to? In the ideal world, I think any fund development person should be reporting to the top. But that doesn't always work. Okay, if you're not reporting to the top, does your boss understand the philosophy of how you're managing your responsibility? So it's taking a copy of a book into my boss and saying, I believe in what's here, and I want you to know the way I'm thinking, and I want to see if we're in alignment with how I'm thinking. And it becomes a place for you to have a dialogue. Forget about the organizational ups and downs. I mean, in the perfect world, the vice president of development or the director of development would be reporting to the president, because that's where the influence comes of how you work with people. That's not reality every place, culturally or circumstantially or because of pure sin. I don't know what the reasons are, but if I know who I am and I'm going to go in there, I'm going to go in there with those particular principles in mind. And it's a mindset. It's a mindset change for the facilitator. Yep. It's a mindset change for the partner who's giving money.
Well, this is an excellent book on getting rid of stinking thinking, right? Having a biblical mindset. So if you are interested in getting a copy of this book, actually, we're going to do a special thing for this podcast. For the next 7 days, we are going to do a flash sale on our Major Donor Mastery class, 25% off the course, and we're going to throw in a copy of this book for free, no charge at all. So if you are interested in learning about Major Donor Mastery, if you're learning about the practical steps of how do I develop relationships, and you want that paired up with having the right mindset of how to go into development, this is going to be a 1-2 punch. So 25% off our Major Donor Mastery course, as well as a free copy of Larry's Intentional Living and Giving. Jim, any last words you want to say regarding this topic?
Well, I hopefully all of you know the great respect I have for Larry. As I said in the beginning, he's forgotten more than I probably will ever know. But Larry has such an amazing philosophy. His years of experience have brought him to having the right mindset when it comes to living and giving. Yeah. And this is an amazing amazing book that I think you're going to really enjoy. And this has been a real privilege, Larry, for us to have you on the show.
Yeah.
And I hope our listeners will learn more about the name Larry Onan, learn about your background, and I hope they can glean a lot from your mindset and your philosophy that you've had for over 60 years in development, and learn as I have at the foot of the master. So thank you, Larry.
Yeah, Jim, if people want to contact me, I'm always open to an email. I just want to help people become free in this area of lifestyle stewardship.
Wow.
So I'm open to dialoguing pretty much by emails, but be glad to do that.
Well, thanks, Larry. I appreciate it. Yep. Jason, you want to take us home?
Well, so much of what we do and teach here at Fundraising Masterminds is rooted in the exact mindset that Larry brings to the table. We always say it's not about transactional relationships. It's all about building partners. It's all about transformational relationships. And so much of that is the way you think about things,
right?
And that's really what separates the sheep from the goats in terms of biblical development, in terms of development processes and principles. And so we're super excited to be able to share this book with you. We hope that you learn a ton from Larry and learn a ton about how to have the right mindset. So go ahead and check out the link in the description below to get a copy of Larry's book. And of course, go to fundraisingmasterminds.net to learn more about practical solutions for how to implement some of the things once you have these mindsets in place. All right, well, this wraps up our episode on intentional living and giving with Larry Onan.
Glad to be with you guys. Blessings on what you're endeavoring to do to help other people be fruitful.
Thank you, Larry, for joining us on the program today. It was great having you.
Take care.